What's up, guys? Suzanne Quast here, and I have an amazing guest for you guys today. Her name is Dr. Patti Johnson. She's a clinical psychologist. She is also founder of Empowered Living, so she empowers people to live their lives more fully, effectively, and happily. She works with a lot of couples, and she's also an expert at helping people deal with anxiety. In fact, she even has an app that's called Emma that is filled with tips and tools and techniques, and I'm going to leave that in the comments below. So I'm going to divide this into two separate parts. The first part is going to be quarantine in couples. How do we navigate this time, and how do we deal with times of crisis? Part two is going to be filled with tips and tools and how anxiety affects our bodies. I hope you guys like this, and I hope you guys get a lot of value out of this. Thank you.
Speaking of being available to our partners, okay. So I have friends who are on various ends of the spectrum for this, right? I have some friends that have gone through this pandemic and they feel closer to their partner more than ever. I have friends who I thought were really good and they're now saying they're going to get divorced or they're going to break up. I have other friends who are like, if I have to listen to this man chew one more meal, I'm literally going to stab him in the neck with my fork.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I just feel like right now, everything just feels a little too close for comfort, right?
Yeah.
What are you seeing in working with couples? Are there certain themes or certain issues that keep coming up over and over?
Everything you just said, I'm seeing. I'm seeing couples that are getting along better than ever. I'm seeing couples that are really regressing to some old behavior patterns, and old wounds are coming up, and particular sensitivities to their partner's behaviors that they find irritating are coming to their awareness. So I'm really seeing a little bit of everything. I do think everybody's really doing their best. People are really trying. Couples are trying. Families are really trying. But this is such a stressful time that it's easy to kind of revert back to some reactive, conflictual types of behaviors.
When you say revert back to certain kinds of behaviors, what do you mean? Do you mean like emotionally regress back to a certain time in their life when they weren't as aware, or they weren't as mindful, or they didn't have the techniques that they have today that they did 10 years ago? What do you mean by that?
Well, I think it's when we had our lives, we were busy more in our lives, doing our everyday activities, where we were leaving the house more often, going to work, going to recreational activities, joining groups, going out to dinner. We were doing a lot of things that gave us pleasure and brought meaning to our lives. What we really need is to do things that bring meaning to our lives. And when those things have been removed one by one, we don't have any of those things that offset like our normal ways that we balance our self-care and our day. We're kind of left with some unresolved feelings and some unfinished business. It's mostly historical, ways that we express our attachment to another person's, ways that we express our needs, some sort of unconscious rules for living that we might have that are basically unconscious, and yet when we don't have other things we're focused on, we start noticing them, like what our partner's doing that we don't like, that they shouldn't be doing. They should be doing other things. If you're telling your partner, you should be doing this, you shouldn't be doing that, isn't that a rule for living that you hold within yourself? And
and also I've heard you say this before, never, you shouldn't say should.
Yeah.
Or you shouldn't should people, and there shouldn't be you statements.
Yes.
And there should not be absolutes. Like you always do this or you never do that.
Yeah, that's all true. And these are just things that when we're more stressed and we're more overwhelmed, we tend to lose just a little bit of emotional regulation. So that's what I mean by regressing too. We're not quite as emotionally regulated. We don't have all those other things. We just had a great day at work. We had a good workout at the gym. If you like that, you come home, you have things to share. Instead, you're at home and you're trying to manage your schedule and working from home and the children and getting groceries, and a few weeks ago, making sure you had enough paper towels and toilet paper. Your emotional regulation is not as easy to maintain.
That, and you had brought up grief earlier in this,
Yeah.
and I've heard a lot of people talk about this. And do you think that there's some truth to couples are, suffering from grief and they don't understand, or it's conflicting? One person's coping skills is conflicting with another's, and that then appears like a threat to my personal livelihood. So do you think that there's like a inherent conflict in how people are dealing with each other's coping styles?
For some people, yes, because let's use the example of one of the partners in the couple is highly anxious, has a stronger worrying style, and the other one's more like, let's just get it done, and a little bit more resilient and more resourceful, or maybe a little less frightened. Then they may not understand the need for the more anxious one to take extra precautions when going to the store and wearing gloves and wiping off the food with Lysol wipe before you bring it into the house. And they may be frustrated, feel like this partner is making them do a lot more work, and that they're overreacting or they're making too much of it. And then there might be some judgment around that, or criticism. And then when you're judged or criticized, you're good to defend yourself typically, or judge or criticize back. So yes, so this would be a style like where your emotional reactions, you manage it in different ways, and that creates conflict.
So what do you do if you're a couple and you have polarizing opinions about things? How do you create harmony? Like, what techniques do you give to your patients?
Well, I think to start with, the one way you create harmony, the most important way you would create harmony in this time, well, really all the time, and that is that it's really important to accept that your partner has a wide range of feelings. They're not forced into just one type of feeling, like comfortable, positive, not anxious, not irritable. We're going to have a wide variety of feelings. We're going to have anger, we're going to have worry, we're going to have sadness, we're going to have the grief you talked about, and we may not have it at the same time. Our partners are going to have feelings that are inconvenient to us. Like, it's not really convenient to be around an irritable partner, right?
No.
Or an angry partner.
Nope.
And it's not really convenient if you tend to not have a worrying style, to be better at coping with worrying, to be around a highly anxious person that's doing reassurance seeking or awfulizing. That's not so convenient for you to constantly say it's going to be okay, or don't worry, or anything like that. So we want to give our partner a full range of feelings.
Okay.
And then once we allow this full range of feelings, then we can start doing some things that help us connect around the differences. For example, if a woman in the relationship is feeling highly annoyed or highly anxious, and this might be showing up as criticism or upset of any sort, and the man would say, calm down, right? Just calm down. Has that ever been told to you?
We've gotten better. It would be like, relax, and no one relaxes when you say.
I once heard a quote, telling a woman to calm down is kind of like trying to baptize a cat.
It's so true. Yeah, it's not happening.
Right? And then the opposite is, I'm using specific genders, but it could go either way. If a man tends to be short or irritable or a little bit snappy, and the woman's like, that's hurting my feelings, or stop doing that, or stop being so irritable, or stop being so cranky, or stop being so angry, or stop treating me like this. Those are legitimate things to ask for, but it tends not to calm the person down. What's more helpful is to offer empathy in this case, which would be something like, I don't blame you for being irritable. This is really a stressful time. I really don't blame you for being upset. Things just don't seem to be going right. I don't blame you for being, irritable. You haven't been able to get into the office for a long time, or the kids are doing this. And the same thing when a woman, or even a man, but I'm going with the woman right now because I see this working a lot in my couples therapy, where this is really helpful to women, is when she's emotionally dysregulated or emotionally upset or feeling more emotionally fragile, for the man just to say, how can I help right now? what would be helpful to you right now? Because we tend to sometimes rush in and try to fix it. Well, why don't you take a walk? Why don't you just take a break? Why don't you just go up to the room by yourself? I don't want to go to the room by myself. I don't want to take a walk. I've had 3 walks today, right?
Yep.
So if you say, how can I be helpful right now? And it's important to say right now, because you mean I'm here for you in this moment, willing to offer you support and empathy and help. And then that gives the person a chance to say, what would be really helpful for me right now if I could go out and take a walk? So they're not being told to do something. Again, we talked about that inner resistance, but we're being offered empathy and support.
I think that's really good advice. I heard today too somewhere that they said a woman who gets really angry is just typically frustrated that she's not being heard. And so what you're saying is making a woman feel heard, and by problem solving now, like what kind of brings it to this moment and allows her to then feel like, oh, you do care and you are with me in this moment together.
Yes. I share in my couples work, or even my work with men, and they're dealing with emotions in their partner. I tell them, just simply say, what could be helpful right now? And if they say nothing, then you say, well, I'm willing to help. If you can think of something, let me know. You don't have to try to figure out how to fix it. You just have to be willing to offer your help. And then then it's up to the person that you ask to tell you what he or she needs, right? And if they say nothing, then you're off the hook. You don't have to fix this. But you can say, well, if you think of anything, let me know. I mean, that feels like, a warm bath to the soul.
For sure.
If somebody says that to you, both ways. And the same thing when somebody is irritable, instead of like chastising them for being irritable, to offer empathy and validation and agree with them. It's okay to be irritable. Like, yeah, this is a really stressful time. I don't blame you for being upset. Well, I'm just so upset. Yeah, and I don't blame you one bit. This really sucks. Much more helpful than say, well, don't be irritable, don't hurt my feelings.
Yeah, for sure.
Empathy and validation are the golden magical keys in any relationship. And to be honest, that's one of the reasons people come to therapy, because the therapist is there to not only to help solve problems and move a client forward from maybe collapsing to coping to thriving, but we're also there to give validation and allow the person to feel what they feel and give them empathy for that. So if we can do that in our relationships, it's really like magic. Okay,
so you're saying, to recap, that at times our partners are going to feel things that are inconvenient to us.
Yes.
And that how to combat that is by providing them with empathy and asking them what you can do right now to offer them any type of assistance.
Yes.
Right?
And use this word, literally use these words specifically. Because I will say this to a man in my therapy: ask, how can I help right now? Would you repeat that back for me? What do you want me to do?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a totally different feeling. The intention is the same. But if you were asked, Suzanne, how can I help right now versus what do you want me to do? Do you feel the difference?
For sure. What do you want right now? Or what do you want from me sounds like a backhanded way, like you're frustrated, like it just
like you're irritating to that person, you're annoying them. Like, what do you want? Even if the intention is right, words matter. So if you're listening to this podcast, just memorize this. How can I help right now? What would be helpful right now? How could I help you right now? And you know what? This works really well with children too.
Okay.
And teenagers, they're complaining. How could I help right now? There's nothing you could do. Well, if you could think of something, I would like to be able to help.
Okay. Anything else you want to add on to that for helping couples deal with polarizing positions?
Yeah, there was something that you said that all of a sudden they're irritated by their partner, the way they're chewing or something like, did you say that?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So this would be my tip number 2, which is that the number one key to long-lasting relationships is we're all attracted to people that make us feel good about ourselves. We're all attracted to people that make us feel good about ourselves. And when we're more stressed, we're more overwhelmed, we have less energy to put into the relationship to build our partner up, because we're already feeling pretty empty ourselves. But this is something you could do on purpose, is say and do the things to your partner that helps them feel good about themselves. Compliments, kindness, pointing out their strengths, and right now, ignore those behaviors. Just float with those behaviors. In fact, I'll laugh at this. I'll share something every day for the past, like, I think 3 or 4 weeks. My husband's been wearing a baseball cap. We're both working from home. And I looked at him last night. I said, honey, do you think that you might, like, one day not wear your baseball cap? He goes, what, you don't like me, my baseball cap? I go, no, I really like it, but I also like you without it. Right? It's just like I was saying, you look cute when you have your hair, like, just wash your hair. It looks good on you. But I wasn't, but he didn't give me a chance to come down without his cap to say, oh, well, you look great today. So I thought I would just try to move it forward. But it still was said with kindness, and it was said with a little bit of jest, right?
Well, they say, or I read that, couples or relationships don't end typically because people do mean things to each other. They end because people stop doing nice things for each other.
That's exactly right. We all are attracted to people that make us feel good about ourselves. And if you stop, and your partner, that's replaced with the resentment or annoyance or criticism or control or demands or anything like that, then over time, the relationship just loses its steam. It loses its energy. Mm-hmm. And then somebody else says, hey, you're really smart, or you're really attractive, or you're really talented. We're like, oh, well, thanks. We're going to notice that because we're not hearing it in our relationship.
Yeah. That, and something else you said about kindness, and what I'm trying to practice is to be kind rather than to be right. I'm trying not to worry about, like, am I right in my perspective? I'm just trying to, I guess, like, to piggyback on, to have empathy, because a lot of times I feel like what happens in the relationship is, sometimes with my fiance, if I look at, like, he's displaying some kind of anger, what's really underneath that anger is maybe fear, or it's his own anxiety, or it's his own. So I'm trying to be kind to him rather than be like, than to be right.
Yeah. That's a big trap. And that's a big thing that we focus on in couples therapy, is that being right is kind of like playing hot potato, like, this is my point of view, and they throw the potato, but that point of view is wrong. This is my point of view. This is my point of view. And it's just this back and forth of arguing your truth. This is my truth. This is my truth. More my truth. Your truth isn't truth. Substitute any argument in there, right?
Yep.
So that's another thing I would say that's really important right now, is to share your experiences, share your feelings, share your thoughts, around COVID, and listen to what your partner has to say about it. And you don't have to think the same way. It's okay to have different perspectives. It's okay to think differently. I like to say if 2 people are exactly the same, one of them isn't needed, and we don't need to marry our narcissistic twin.
No.
Right, because we grow by having people in our lives that, sometimes cause a little bit of judgment, or criticism, or a need to control. When we see that in ourselves, then we can work on that within ourselves. And if our partner's reflecting back that we want to judge them, or we want to criticize, or we want to control them, that's our issue. It has nothing to do with them. Mm-hmm. As Gottman would say, that most couples issues are really individual issues that show up in the relationship.
Say that again. Most couple issues are individual issues?
Yes, that show up in a relationship. Huh. Like I might have an issue around insecure attachment. So I need a lot of reassurance because my history created this. I didn't do it to myself, but my history created this insecure attachment style. So I'm in a relationship with somebody. I keep making bids for reassurance, bids for affection, bids for this. And when I don't get it, I say, well, you're not giving me what I need. You're not giving me what I need according to my love language. And we start demanding that we get fed, emotionally in this particular way. That's an individual issue. Can you see?
Yeah.
It has to do with an insecure attachment style. And you can work through it with your partner, of course, and figure out ways to manage that. So you're fighting all the time about what my needs are and whether you're giving them to me, but maybe we need to step back and say, well, what about my needs? How are they becoming a demand in this relationship versus just a preference?
Okay.
Or if, one of the partners tends to be more focused on their way of living, their rules for living. And again, when I say rules for living, I mean unconscious beliefs that come from your culture, from your cohorts, from your childhood, from your gender, from your race. These are rules that you internalize as you grow up, that you're taught by the adults in your life. They are a particular way. This is how my wife should be. This is what she should do. This is how my husband should be. This is what she should do. You have a different idea about yourself. They come together. This isn't so much a couple issue. It's an individual issue that shows up and impacts the couple.
Okay.
You're not trying to solve that now while you're home with the COVID virus. In fact, you're doing the opposite. What you're trying to do is allow these things to be there and just float with it, accept it, and share your thoughts and feelings about things in a way that you allow each person's perspective to be valid.
And I would imagine that if you're allowing each person's perspective to be valid, you're creating a sense of intimacy, correct?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
And intimacy too, I feel like it's not always like how do I say this? It's not like it's like this, all this time, this harmonious connection. Sometimes it's like, it's a little, we see things differently. Then we have to sort of come together and then accept each other's differences. And in that creates intimacy. Then we like rebond, if that makes sense.
Yes, because while we're doing that, we're also being vulnerable. We're being vulnerable when we share our emotions and our feelings and our perspectives with their partner, because they could be rejected, they could be criticized. We're being vulnerable as we work through these things together, and vulnerability creates intimacy.
For sure.
And every couple has some sort of conflict. Conflict is not a deal breaker, and conflict during the COVID isolation is not a deal breaker. So let's talk about that just for a second. So if you have had some conflict, one or the other partners may, and probably will in a healthy relationship, make a repair attempt. They'll use humor, they'll use distraction, they'll maybe say apology, or they maybe say, well, let's just let this go. And when that repair attempt is made, the health of the relationship is dependent on the person accepting the repair attempt.
Say that again?
The health of the relationship is dependent on the person accepting the repair attempt. So it's not the conflicts that determine whether a relationship lasts, it's whether you accept a repair attempt. This comes from Gottman's work. So if you had an argument and one of the partners says, you know what, let's just let it go, let's watch a show and let's just relax a little bit on the couch. Another one says, oh, you always do that. You always just try to just distract yourself and avoid it. That was a repair attempt. You just rejected it. Now you're back into the conflict. If you say, that's a good idea, let's table this. I say table it for 24 hours. If the conflict is not resolved within a reasonable amount of time, within 20, 30 minutes or so, then table it. Wait 24 hours and come back and think, what could I do that would be more helpful in resolving this problem?
Mm-hmm. Okay, I think that's really good advice.
Yeah. Take a break.
You know what, something I also thought about with this is, and I don't want to minimize anything that's transpired, but I do like to always look for like what the opportunity is. right? And you and I have kind of had this conversation before, but Viktor Frankl wrote the book Man's Search for Meaning. And in that he says something, he wrote this book, he's a Holocaust survivor, endured things that people couldn't fathom in lifetimes, right? But he says in the book, suffering ceases to be suffering when it has meaning. And so I guess I'm curious for you, like what advantage or what could we learn from this? Could this be could there be opportunities within this crisis?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a really good point. I want to piggyback on what you said about Viktor Frankl too. There was a guru, I'm not sure who his name was, but he was suffering from stomach cancer. He was in a lot of pain. And at night, his devotees would hear him moaning and praying. And one morning, one of the devotees said to him, like, Guruji, which means beloved teacher, I'm so sorry for your suffering. And he said, there's no suffering. There's pain, but there's no suffering.
Mm.
So he wasn't tacking on, like, I've been a good guru all my life, not like that other guru. And why am I the one that has this disease? Or why is this happening to me? It was more like, I'm in pain, but I'm not suffering, because there's a certain amount of acceptance. So this goes to, during this time, there is a lot of pain, but we can also look at ways that we can grow together. Like, what are our values? What are our values as a couple? And values, by the way, is a direction. It's not a goal.
Okay.
A direction for your life. So one of my values is to empower myself and other people to live their lives more fully and effectively. That's why I read. That's why I study. That's why I'm a therapist. That's one of my values, to be of service in that particular way. And so obviously I can do this when I'm unable to go to my office. I can still do the work that's meaningful to me. But other people can look at their values. What is our values as a couple? Is it family? So during this time, are we spending time with family? Are we playing like some games with families? Are we talking? Are we watching TV? Are we putting our phones down and having just family time? If my value is love of learning, what can I be learning right now? What could we be learning right now? So if you stop to think, what's the direction that moves my life forward? What are my values? And couples have values together too. It draws us. In fact, successful relationships, you could be from different cultures, different races, different religions, but if you share the same values, that's the connection. That's what moves you forward. That moves you in a direction, and then you can set steps. So yes, there's a lot of ability and potential right now to really ask ourselves, because we're not distracted as much by the world. We might have more time. I know a lot of people are really overwhelmed with responsibilities at home, but we have time to think about, what does this mean for me? Who do I want to be at the end? And let's take a long-term view. A year from now, we're back to a normal life, or what's normal now, and we're all adjusted to that. And we look back at this time and ask ourselves, did I use that time in a way that I would have wanted to, if I could do it again? If I had to do it all over again, what would I do differently?
So try to have that perspective.
Yeah, have a long range perspective. And that guides you to, like, maybe I would have, read more. Maybe I would have, really done those online exercise classes. Maybe I would have got into doing a little more cooking. Maybe I would have just sat and talked to my spouse and been curious about them. Like I hadn't been in a while, like, tell me some things about you. Tell me about this. What do you think about this? And ask some questions and be interested.
Do you think it's also
seek to be interested rather than interesting?
Yeah, be interested. Yeah. Do you think it would be helpful for couples then to sit down and even talk about that? Like, what are our values? I mean, that might sound kind of cheesy, but I feel like that could be really important.
No, I think it's really important. Like, what's the direction we want our life to take? What is going to give our life meaning as a couple? One of value is diligence, just being very diligent. Like, how would you even take that type of value and put it into right now? Like, would you start looking for different job opportunities? Would you look at, read some information about your particular field of work that helps you learn and grow in that? That would be a form of diligence. Do you start reorganizing, doing some of those to-do lists around the house? Do you do some painting? Do you do things like that? So you could take it into a lot of directions when you think about it. You know, how do we make this time meaningful to us? That's a valid question. You may not use the word values, but you can say, how do we make this time meaningful to us? If we can create meaning out of this time, what would it look like? What would we do differently?
Mm. I think that's really healthy and really helpful. I guess what happens if you and your partner have totally different opinions on what that looks like?
Well, I would think that if you were with your partner, you probably have some similarities. That's why you're together.
One would hope.
One would hope. You know, that's a good question. You know, it really is. You could have very opposing points of view, and I think then it's to seek to be understanding as much as being understood.
Okay. I think that's good. To end this and wrap it up, what are 3 relationship tips or hacks that you would give to the viewers today?
Okay, these are going to seem so simple. However, they will work. One is kind of what we talked about, accepting a wide range of emotions in your partner. Don't expect perfection or always being in a positive mood. Ask how you can be helpful, validate angry feelings. This is a stressful time. Acknowledge, validate, ask to be helpful. That would be the first one. Just letting people feel what they feel, not try to prescribe a certain feeling.
Okay.
That would be the second. The second one would be really remember that relationships that last, they last because each person makes the other person feel good about themselves. It's kind of like when we first started dating, the things we would do that made the partner feel good about themselves. And we don't have to guess what would make our partner feel good about themselves. You could probably write down what would make your partner feel good about himself, right?
Yeah, for sure.
You could come up, and he could for you.
I would hope so, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure he could. And so we know what it is, and do those things. You know, do the compliments, withhold criticism, avoid the you statements, avoid always, never, don't ask why questions. We won't talk about that right now, but just try to make your partner feel good about yourself. Even if you don't have a lot of emotional energy, when you give a compliment and you make somebody feel good about themselves, you actually feel better. It lifts your mood.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
Something genuine, right? So that would be the second one. I guess the third one would come back to that basic that kind of encompasses both is not to be judgmental. Life's hard enough right now, not to be judgmental and harsh and critical, but seek to be kind. Like we did that brief meditation on kindness.
Mm-hmm.
You know, walk into the room and think to yourself, even if you're stressed out, how could I be kind right now? How could I be kind to my kids? How could I be kind to my dog? How could I be kind to my spouse?
Yes. I've even decided to reach out to 3 people a day and just do random acts of like, just, hey, thinking about you, or reach out and call them. I don't know. It makes, you know, I feel like it's forming a connection, and
It's beautiful. I love that. And it's also part of your value system to reach out and connect. You're being kind, you're lifting somebody up. And if you look at some of the Instagram videos that we see that warm our hearts, is people being kind, people making masks, people visiting, people holding signs outside the hospital, showing appreciation. That's part of kindness, to show appreciation. You know, whatever you appreciate goes up in value. So to show appreciation makes us feel better. And when we're showing appreciation to other people, we're more appreciated. We're not doing it to get appreciation, but it's always easy to appreciate something in your life if you look for opportunity or ways to express it. Because stress is going to take you away from that. Again, it goes back to what we talked about. It's purposeful. It's mindful. It's a mindful action, doing one thing on purpose in the present moment for a specific length of time that lifts you and your partner up.
okay.
All right.
Drop the mic. Thank you. This was really helpful, and I'm sure it's gonna, you know, help a lot of people deal with this time, and even not just even during this time. You know, any conflict that arises in their relationship, I feel like you can practice this during any time.
Yeah, absolutely. This isn't just for this time, but it's really needed during this time.
Yes. Okay.
Thank you for the time to share these ideas with you. I appreciate it.
Yes.
I appreciate you.
And I appreciate you. And I'll put all the stuff in the comments, where to find you, how to download your app, all the stuff.
Okay, that's great. Thanks, Suzanne.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.